When Jesus stood before his disciples and declared, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he was not making a claim about his personal superiority over other human beings. He was revealing the most profound and transformational secret in the entire history of spiritual teaching. This single statement contains the master key to every healing you will ever experience, every demonstration of supply, every moment of genuine inner peace that transcends circumstances. For more than 2,000 years, humanity has completely missed what Jesus was actually communicating in this revolutionary statement. We have worshipped the man while ignoring his central message. We have made Jesus special, different, separate, and unreachable. We have placed him on such a high pedestal that his teachings became impossible for ordinary people to live and demonstrate in daily experience. By making Jesus into someone fundamentally different from ourselves, we have abandoned the very teaching he came to reveal. Jesus was not asking you to worship him as separate from you. He was teaching you to understand exactly what he understood about the nature of identity, consciousness, and divine presence. The I am that he spoke of was not his personal ego identity. It was the infinite presence of God expressing itself as individual conscious being. Here is what changes absolutely everything about how you approach spiritual life and practical manifestation. I am is not merely a phrase you speak or a grammatical construction. It is a state of being, a level of consciousness, a recognition of your true spiritual identity. It is the presence of God announcing itself as your actual nature, not your personality or your body or your history or your circumstances. When Jesus said, "I am the way," he was revealing that recognizing this divine consciousness within yourself is the only real power, the only genuine presence, the only ultimate reality that can actually transform your life from limitation to freedom. Every single time you say, "I am sick," or "I am broke," or "I am alone," or "I am afraid," you are using the most sacred name of God to create and reinforce your present experience. This is not religious metaphor or poetic language or inspirational philosophy. This is the actual mechanics of how manifestation works in consciousness. Joel Goldsmith spent more than 4 decades of his life helping thousands of people understand this principle because he discovered it was the master key that unlocked every other spiritual teaching and made practical demonstration possible. The precise moment you truly grasp that I am is literally God's name announcing itself as your consciousness. Your entire relationship with life undergoes fundamental transformation. You immediately stop begging an external deity somewhere outside yourself for help with your problems. You stop trying to manipulate external conditions to create internal peace. You begin to rest in the profound recognition that the kingdom of God is already established within your own consciousness. Joel Goldsmith came to this revolutionary understanding after many years of desperate spiritual searching, trying every technique and system available. He finally realized that genuine healing does not come from God doing something to you from outside. True healing emerges from recognizing what God is already being as you, expressing through you, living as your very consciousness in this present moment. The Christ consciousness that animated and expressed through the man Jesus of Nazareth is the exact same consciousness that is animating your breathing right now as you hear these words. This is not theology. This is not belief system. This is recognition of what is actually true about the nature of your being beyond all appearances of limitation. This is precisely why Jesus made that other revolutionary statement. The works that I do, you shall do also, and even greater works than these shall you do. He was not being falsely humble or exaggerating to encourage his followers. He was stating simple metaphysical fact. Once you understand that I am is the presence of God expressing uniquely through every point of aware consciousness, you recognize your own inherent divine nature. This recognition is not arrogance or inflation of ego. It is simply seeing clearly what is true beneath the surface appearances of limitation and separation. When you truly comprehend this at a depth beyond intellectual concept, you naturally stop living from the limited level of human struggle, fear, and constant effort. You stop identifying your true self with temporary conditions like limitation, disease, lack, and conflict. You begin to live from the consciousness that knows itself as already whole, already complete, already eternally supplied by infinite intelligent source. This understanding does not typically develop overnight through one dramatic experience. It requires consistent daily practice, sometimes taking weeks or months of returning again and again to this foundational truth despite appearances that seem to contradict it. A woman named Margaret attended one of Joel Goldsmith's classes in California, carrying the unbearable weight of chronic pain throughout her body that no doctor had been able to successfully resolve or even adequately explain. She had been suffering with this debilitating condition for more than 3 years. She had tried everything that medical science could offer, every treatment, every medication, every therapeutic approach available. She had prayed desperately for God to heal her body, spending hours begging and pleading for relief from her constant suffering. Nothing changed in her condition because she was approaching the situation completely backwards. She was asking God to do something to her from outside, rather than recognizing what God already was being as her true nature beneath the appearance of physical distress. Joel did not pray for her healing in the traditional sense. He did not ask God to remove her pain or fix her body. Instead, he patiently guided her to sit in deep silence and recognize one foundational truth. I am is the only presence actually here in this moment. Not I am Margaret trapped in a painful body, but rather, I am the infinite wholeness of God expressing as this conscious being. She committed to practicing this recognition for 40 minutes every single day. After approximately 3 weeks of this consistent daily practice, something fundamental shifted in Margaret's consciousness and experience. The chronic pain did not gradually decrease bit by bit over time. It simply dissolved completely one morning as she sat in quiet recognition of her true spiritual nature beyond physical identification. She suddenly realized with crystal clarity that the pain had been maintained entirely by her identification with a suffering limited body, rather than with the infinite divine presence that was her actual identity. Joel also worked extensively with a businessman facing complete bankruptcy after years of building his company. This intelligent man had worked incredibly hard, made sound business decisions based on good information, yet circumstances seemed to conspire relentlessly against him despite his best efforts. He came to Joel asking desperately for prayers to change his deteriorating financial situation and save his business from collapse. Joel told him something that initially seemed shocking and even offensive. Your true supply is not located in external conditions, market forces, or economic circumstances. Your supply exists in consciousness itself. He taught this man to completely stop looking to the economy, to potential clients, to market conditions, or to any external source for his good and provision. Instead of focusing outward, Joel instructed him to spend dedicated time each day simply recognizing this truth. I am the infinite source expressing itself here and now through my consciousness. Not hoping this might become true, not wishing for it desperately, but recognizing what is already factually true beyond appearances. The kingdom of heaven means the realm of absolute wholeness already exists within your own consciousness, not somewhere external. Within approximately 2 months of this transformed approach, unexpected opportunities began emerging that this man had not been able to see before through his consciousness of lack and struggle. Not because God suddenly decided to help him after ignoring his previous desperate prayers, but because his fundamental consciousness shifted from looking outward for supply to recognizing the infinite intelligent source within his own being. New clients appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Previous business deals that had been blocked suddenly unlocked and moved forward. His business not only survived but recovered fully and began thriving within 6 months. The external circumstances reorganized themselves to match his transformed internal consciousness of infinite supply rather than limited resources. A mother whose young child struggled with severe behavioral challenges that disrupted their entire family discovered Joel's teaching during her darkest period. For many years, she had been desperately trying to fix her son, change his difficult behavior through various interventions, and praying intensely for God to heal him and make him normal. The more she focused all her attention and energy on the problem, the more solid and immovable it seemed to become. She was completely exhausting herself fighting against what she perceived as unchangeable reality. Joel taught her something revolutionary. Stop seeing your child through the distorted lens of problem and limitation. Instead, practice consistently recognizing the Christ presence as the actual truth of your child's being, not denying the challenging behavior you witness with your physical senses. but absolutely refusing to accept it as ultimate truth about his spiritual identity. She spent focused time each morning recognizing clearly, I am expressing as my child's true divine nature, whole and complete and perfect. This transformation was not instantaneous or dramatic. For 5 full weeks, she maintained this practice faithfully, while the difficult behavior continued without apparent change. Then gradual shifts began appearing in small ways. Her son became noticeably calmer, more focused, more peaceful in his responses. Teachers at school began commenting on positive changes they were observing. By 3 months of consistent practice, the transformation in this child was absolutely undeniable to everyone who knew him, not because she fixed him through human effort or manipulation, but because she stopped seeing him through the limiting lens of problem consciousness and began recognizing and holding steady an awareness of his true divine nature. These stories represent what becomes possible when anyone genuinely grasps the truth Jesus revealed through I am the way. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more, Joel Goldsmith Wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Once you have grasped the foundational truth of I am as your spiritual identity, Joel Goldsmith taught several specific practices that significantly deepen and stabilize this life-changing realization. The first essential practice he emphasized is what he called the practice of the presence. This means intentionally pausing multiple times throughout your busy day, not to ask God for anything or to try to get something, but simply to acknowledge this truth. The infinite is here now in this present moment. God is present as the very consciousness that is reading these words right now, hearing this message, aware of itself as existing. Set aside just 5 minutes, 3 distinct times during each day. Not to pray for desired outcomes, not to visualize specific things you want to manifest, but simply to rest in pure awareness of divine presence without agenda or goal. Let whatever thoughts arise come and go naturally without fighting them or following them. Return again and again to the simple, direct recognition, I am here now. Infinite presence is expressing itself as this exact moment of awareness. This is not a meditation technique to achieve something. This is conscious recognition of what is already true about reality in this moment. Most people completely fill their spiritual practice time with endless requests, desires, visualizations, and attempts to manipulate consciousness into producing specific results they want. Joel taught exactly the opposite approach. Empty yourself completely of all wanting and needing. Rest fully in the wholeness and fullness that already is present before you ask for anything. The second crucial practice Joel emphasized consistently was what he called impersonalization of problems and conditions. This means recognizing clearly that problems, diseases, limitations, and challenges are not actually personal to you as an individual. They represent the universal human belief in separation from infinite source. When you stop taking conditions personally as being about you specifically, you stop giving them power over your identity and consciousness. If you are currently experiencing financial lack in your life, it is not because you personally are deficient, unworthy, or being punished. It is because human consciousness in general believes in the reality of limitation and separation from infinite supply. If you are experiencing disease or pain in your body, it is not because you specifically are broken or have failed spiritually. It is because human consciousness believes in vulnerability, deterioration, and separation from infinite life. When you see clearly and maintain awareness that these challenges are universal false beliefs appearing in your experience rather than personal truths about your spiritual identity, you stop fighting them on a personal level. This shift in perspective makes an enormous difference in your ability to stand firm in truth. This absolutely does not mean denying or suppressing your current experience of difficulty. It means recognizing clearly that what you are experiencing is the temporary appearing of universal false belief in your awareness, not the eternal truth of your divine nature. From this recognition of impersonalization, you can stand firm in I am the truth, rather than continuing to identify your real self with the temporary appearance of limitation. Joel also taught the powerful practice of what he called resting in the Word. This means finding one specific spiritual truth that resonates deeply with your soul and then living with it continuously throughout your day for an extended period. Not repeating it mechanically like a magic spell or mantra, but letting it gradually permeate every level of your consciousness until it becomes your automatic response to life. Perhaps you choose "The kingdom of God is within me," or "I and the Father are one," or simply "I am itself." Choose just one truth that speaks to your present need and level of understanding. Let this truth be your constant companion for many days or even weeks at a time. When fear suddenly arises in response to circumstances, immediately return to this truth. When doubt appears and tries to convince you nothing is working, remember this truth. When external circumstances look completely overwhelming, rest in this truth. You are not using these words as magic formulas that make things happen. You are letting this truth reprogram the deep subconscious patterns of consciousness that have been creating your experience for many years. This practice works gradually and cumulatively over time, not instantly. You will not necessarily feel dramatically different immediately after beginning this practice. But over a period of weeks and months, you will begin noticing that your automatic responses to life situations have shifted fundamentally. Where you once automatically reacted with fear and panic, you now find yourself naturally resting in peace. Where you once felt helpless and victimized, you now sense an inner stability and strength. This is consciousness transformation actively at work. The final technique Joel emphasized as essential was practicing gratitude from recognition of what already is, rather than from hope for what you want to attract. Do not be grateful because you hope that being thankful will magically attract good things into your life through some cosmic bargaining system. Be grateful because you recognize clearly that infinite good is already fully present in consciousness right now. Each evening before sleep, take just 3 focused minutes to acknowledge not what you hope will come in the future, but what already is true in present reality. I am grateful that infinite intelligence is present right now as my consciousness. I am grateful that divine supply is flowing constantly as my life. I am grateful that perfect wholeness is the eternal truth of my being. This is not trying to convince yourself of something that is not true. This is recognizing reality beneath appearances. These 4 practices work together synergistically to shift your entire consciousness from constantly seeking, struggling, and lacking to genuinely recognizing, resting, and receiving what already is. They are not techniques to get something from God that you do not already have. They are specific ways of systematically removing the obstacles in consciousness to recognizing what God already is being as you in this present moment. When practiced consistently over time, they produce genuine transformation of consciousness that then naturally manifests as transformed conditions in your experience. Let's address with complete honesty the real challenges you will inevitably face when attempting to live from this teaching in daily life. The biggest and most frustrating obstacle is the significant gap between intellectual understanding and actual lived experience from transformed consciousness. You can fully grasp "I am the way" as an inspiring concept in your mind while still automatically reacting to life circumstances from fear, lack, and limitation. This gap between knowing and being frustrates countless sincere seekers on the spiritual path. They wonder why understanding a profound truth intellectually does not immediately and automatically change their daily experience and responses. They read inspiring books, listen to transformative teachings, have moments of clarity and insight, yet find themselves still struggling with the same old patterns when facing real-life challenges and pressures. Joel Goldsmith was completely honest about this frustrating reality. He taught clearly that genuine consciousness transformation happens in layers over extended time, not instantly. Your surface conscious mind might accept and agree with a spiritual truth, while much deeper patterns of belief formed over many years continue operating automatically beneath awareness, controlling your responses and creating your experience. These deep subconscious patterns were formed gradually over years or even decades of conditioning, programming, and repetition. They do not simply dissolve and disappear because you read something inspiring or have one powerful moment of spiritual clarity or insight. The real challenge that tests your commitment is continuing the daily practice faithfully even when nothing seems to be changing in your circumstances. Another absolutely real challenge you must face is the constant, powerful pull of physical appearances and sense testimony. Your physical senses report disease in your body with unmistakable symptoms. Your bank account shows concrete lack with actual numbers. Your relationships reflect obvious conflict with real words and actions. Everything visible and tangible screams loudly that limitation is solid reality, while the truth of infinite presence remains completely invisible to physical perception. The human mind is designed to believe what it sees, hears, touches, and measures, while automatically doubting what it cannot perceive through the five physical senses. This is natural biological programming for physical survival. Joel taught that this is exactly where committed spiritual practice matters most and makes the crucial difference. Anyone can easily recognize divine presence when life circumstances are comfortable, health is good, money is flowing, and relationships are harmonious. The real spiritual work that produces genuine transformation happens when you maintain recognition of infinite presence, even when every single appearance aggressively contradicts it. This is not denial of what you see and experience. This is not pretending things are fine when they clearly are not. This is refusing to accept temporary appearance as ultimate reality about your spiritual nature and identity. This requires what Joel called taking no thought about conditions, not suppressing worried thoughts through willpower or forced positive thinking, but recognizing they are just thoughts arising in consciousness, not truth or reality. When fear arises about your financial situation, you do not fight against the fear or try to make it go away. You recognize, I am the presence of infinite supply, and let the fear be present without believing it or making decisions from it. Some sincere people struggle tremendously with this teaching because they are looking for and expecting dramatic supernatural experiences and manifestations. They want burning bushes, miraculous signs, overwhelming feelings of divine presence, instant healings, and undeniable proof. When their daily practice feels quiet, subtle, and completely ordinary without fireworks, they automatically assume it is not working and consider abandoning the practice. But Joel taught extensively that true spiritual realization is very often subtle and natural rather than dramatic and supernatural. You might not have powerful visions or overwhelming experiences of divine presence. Instead, you will gradually notice over weeks that you are significantly less anxious than you were before beginning practice. Problems that once completely consumed your attention and energy now seem somehow manageable and less threatening. You respond to challenging situations with an inner stability and centeredness you definitely did not possess just months ago. This is real consciousness transformation actively working, even though it lacks the dramatic fireworks and instant miracles you might have been expecting. The real danger here is constantly comparing your personal experience to others or to inspiring stories of instant dramatic healing you have heard. Your spiritual path is absolutely unique to your consciousness. Your particular consciousness has its own specific patterns, conditioning, and timing for transformation. Trust the gradual process even when it seems frustratingly slow compared to stories of instant miracles. Joel often said that one single hour of true recognition of divine presence accomplishes far more genuine transformation than years of desperate pleading prayer. The final significant challenge many people face is growing isolation and loneliness on the spiritual path. When you genuinely begin living from I am consciousness rather than victim consciousness, you rapidly discover that most people around you operate from completely different assumptions about reality. They believe firmly in luck, in victimhood, in getting God to help them, in manipulation and control. Your conversation becomes increasingly difficult because you are literally speaking from entirely different realities and assumptions. They discuss problems as ultimate reality. You recognize problems as temporary appearances in consciousness. They seek to change conditions. You work to transform consciousness. This fundamental difference makes ordinary conversation feel strange and disconnected. Joel strongly encouraged finding even one other person who genuinely understands this teaching. Join a study group focused on these principles, even if it must be online rather than in person. Read Joel's books repeatedly until the principles penetrate deep consciousness. Listen to recordings of his actual classes regularly. You absolutely need consistent reminders and reinforcement because the world's voice is extremely loud and constant, continuously pulling you back to conventional victim consciousness and material focus. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Once you have faithfully practiced these foundational principles for several months with consistency, you will inevitably face advanced situations that test your understanding at much deeper levels than before. A man named Robert had been sincerely practicing Joel Goldsmith's teachings for approximately 1 full year. His chronic health issues had improved dramatically. His previously unstable finances had become steady and reliable. His difficult relationships had deepened and harmonized significantly. Then, without warning, his wife received a diagnosis of serious illness from her doctor after routine testing. Everything in Robert wanted immediately to panic, to desperately beg God to heal her, to frantically try every possible treatment available. But Joel had taught him clearly that the moment of real crisis is exactly when you must stand firmest in spiritual truth, not abandon it for human solutions alone, not becoming cold, unfeeling, or detached from her suffering, but maintaining crystal clear consciousness regardless of appearances. Robert spent multiple hours daily recognizing the Christ presence as the absolute truth of his wife's being beneath all symptoms. He did not deny her uncomfortable symptoms or tell her they were not real. He fully supported appropriate medical treatment and care. But internally, in his own consciousness where the real work happens, he absolutely refused to accept disease as ultimate reality about her spiritual identity. He rested consistently in this recognition. I am the life eternal expressing as her being right now. This practice was not easy or comfortable. Some days he struggled significantly with fear and doubt, but he returned again and again to this recognition. After 4 challenging months, her condition completely reversed. Medical doctors were genuinely surprised and could not fully explain it, but Robert understood perfectly what had happened. An entrepreneur named David successfully applied these consciousness principles to significant business expansion after stabilizing his existing operation. He had effectively used consciousness work to move his business from struggle to stability over approximately 18 months. Now he felt guided to expand into completely new markets that would require substantial investment and risk. But predictably, all his old fears arose with intensity. What if this expansion fails completely? What if he loses everything he has built? What if his family suffers from his ambitious decision? What if he is making a terrible mistake? Joel's teaching told him clearly and firmly, never make important decisions from fear or from desire. Make them only from the recognition of divine guidance present as your own consciousness, which knows the right path. David spent 3 full weeks not planning, strategizing, or analyzing options, but simply resting daily in the deep awareness that infinite intelligence was present as his mind right now. From that place of inner clarity and peace, he finally saw the right path forward with certainty, not through cleverly analyzing pros and cons or calculating probabilities, but through an inner knowing that arose naturally from resting in presence. He moved forward with confidence. Significant challenges appeared during implementation, as they always do in any substantial undertaking. But each time obstacles arose, he returned immediately to this recognition. I am the wisdom expressing here now as right action. His expansion succeeded well beyond his initial projections, not through clever human strategy or manipulation, but through consciousness alignment with infinite intelligence. A passionate teacher named Lisa faced the challenging question of applying this spiritual understanding to obvious social injustice and systemic oppression. She directly witnessed profound inequality, human suffering, and oppressive systems harming vulnerable people daily. How could she possibly recognize divine presence as ultimate reality when such obvious evil existed everywhere? Wasn't this privileged spiritual teaching just convenient bypassing of real urgent problems requiring concrete action? Joel Goldsmith addressed this legitimate concern directly and clearly. Recognizing divine presence as ultimate reality does not mean ignoring injustice, oppression, or evil in the world. It means refusing to empower evil by believing it is ultimate reality or permanent truth. From the consciousness that knows clearly, I am the only presence and power, you take inspired, effective action in the world. Not action born from rage, despair, or victimhood, but action flowing from recognition of truth. Lisa continued her important justice work with renewed energy, but now from fundamentally transformed consciousness rather than from anger and burnout. She stopped seeing oppressors as evil beings beyond redemption and began recognizing them as humans, trapped in false belief and separation consciousness. She worked passionately for systemic change while maintaining inner peace and spiritual stability, regardless of outcomes. Her actual effectiveness in creating change increased significantly because she was not constantly burning out from anger and despair. She was serving from recognition of the divine potential present in every person, including those currently expressing through harmful systems. This consciousness of wholeness in all beings made her more effective, not less engaged with real problems. The most advanced application of this teaching is maintaining transformed consciousness, even in the face of death itself, the ultimate human fear. When Joel Goldsmith faced his own terminal illness in his final months, he faithfully practiced exactly what he had taught thousands of others for 40 years. He did not deny his body's deteriorating condition or pretend symptoms were not occurring. He did not refuse appropriate medical care and comfort measures. But internally, he rested continuously in the recognition that I am is eternal, infinite, and completely untouched by the dissolution of temporary physical form. This teaching is not about conquering death or living forever in a physical body, which is neither possible nor desirable. It is about recognizing that your true identity transcends physical existence entirely. The body appears in consciousness and eventually disappears, but the I am that you truly are is eternal presence itself. Joel passed peacefully and fully conscious, resting in this truth without fear or resistance. For those currently facing mortality in themselves or in loved ones, this teaching offers genuine peace that transcends circumstances, not false hope of physical immortality or denial of natural processes, but deep recognition of eternal spiritual identity beyond all physical manifestation. The body is temporary vehicle and expression in the material world. The consciousness that declares I am and knows itself as existing is infinite presence itself, untouched by birth or death of forms. This recognition transforms the fear of death into peaceful acceptance of eternal life, expressing through temporary forms. After many months or even years of consistent faithful practice of these principles, something absolutely fundamental shifts in your entire experience of life and self. You no longer wake up each morning trying desperately to just get through another difficult day. You wake naturally aware that infinite presence is living itself as this new day unfolding now. You no longer face challenging situations wondering anxiously how you will possibly manage them with your limited resources. You face challenges knowing with certainty that divine intelligence is present right now as your consciousness, providing everything needed for right action. This is not arrogance, inflation, or spiritual delusion. It is simple clarity about what is true. You have personally witnessed too many times that when you rest in I am recognition, perfect solutions appear, unexpected strength emerges, and deep peace remains regardless of external circumstances. You have watched your own consciousness gradually transform over time from constant anxious seeking to confident resting in present awareness. The concrete evidence of your own lived experience confirms repeatedly the truth of what Jesus was teaching through I am the way. People around you begin noticing something distinctly different about you, though most cannot name exactly what has changed. They sense a stability and centeredness in you that circumstances do not shake or disturb. Some people are naturally attracted to this quality of peaceful presence. Others feel threatened by it because it challenges their victim consciousness. Your job is never to convince anyone of this truth or prove it to skeptics. Your only job is to continue recognizing truth steadily regardless of others' reactions or beliefs. The transformation gradually extends far beyond your personal benefit and comfort. When you genuinely live from I am consciousness consistently, you naturally become a healing presence wherever you happen to be. Not because you try to heal people or fix their problems, but because the consciousness of wholeness that you recognize and rest in radiates naturally and affects the atmosphere. People in your presence often feel unexplainably peaceful, hopeful, or clarified without understanding why. Joel Goldsmith called this profound phenomenon the ministry of presence. You are not preaching at people, teaching them principles or trying to fix their problems. You are simply so established in recognition of divine presence that it naturally affects everyone and everything in your vicinity. A cashier has a noticeably better day after briefly interacting with you, though neither of you discusses anything spiritual. A worried friend feels mysteriously calmer and more hopeful just sitting in your company for an hour. This is not your personal power or special ability. It is the Christ consciousness naturally expressing through you and touching others. This is exactly why Jesus said, "I am the way," rather than "I, Jesus, am the way." He was not claiming personal specialness or superiority over other humans. He was revealing that living from divine consciousness recognition transforms not only your personal experience, but creates genuine healing effects in the world around you, wherever you go. This is your destiny and purpose too. As you faithfully practice this understanding daily, you will discover through experience that problems, challenges, and difficulties still arise regularly in your life, but your fundamental relationship to them transforms completely and permanently. Instead of seeing problems as terrible threats requiring desperate, frantic effort to fix or escape, you begin seeing them as valuable opportunities to practice recognition of truth at deeper levels. Each challenge becomes a clear invitation to return to "I am" consciousness, rather than falling into "I am this terrible circumstance" identification. Financial pressure appears in your experience. Old unconscious, you would immediately panic and spiral into fear and desperate schemes. Present conscious, you recognizes clearly, "I am the infinite source expressing here now," and takes appropriate action from peace. Uncomfortable health symptoms arise in your body. Old unconscious, you would spiral rapidly into fear, catastrophic thinking, and desperate seeking. Present conscious, you rests firmly in "I am the wholeness of being," while taking appropriate practical care. Relationship conflict emerges with someone close to you. Old unconscious, you would defend, attack, blame, and create more separation. Present conscious, you maintains steady awareness of divine presence in all beings involved. This absolutely does not mean problems magically vanish the instant you recognize truth. It means you face them from fundamentally transformed consciousness rather than from fear and limitation. And from transformed consciousness, you naturally receive inner guidance, unexpected strength, and creative solutions that were simply not available from anxious struggling and desperate manipulation. Life still moves with its natural rhythms and changes, but you are no longer helplessly tossed by its waves. You are anchored firmly in eternal presence regardless of changing conditions. Understanding why Jesus said, "I am the way," is not merely intellectual achievement or accumulation of spiritual knowledge. It represents the profound difference between struggling through life desperately hoping God will eventually help you, and recognizing that the infinite presence of God is already being you right now. This recognition transforms absolutely everything about your experience, your consciousness, and your life. Not overnight through instant magic, but certainly and steadily through consciousness shift. Your spiritual work now is consistent daily practice regardless of appearances. Return faithfully each day to recognition of "I am" as your true identity beyond personality. Not the small I of personality, ego, body, or personal history. The "I am" of infinite presence expressing itself as this unique point of awareness and consciousness. As you practice faithfully over time, your entire experience naturally reorganizes itself around that recognition. Health improves steadily as consciousness of wholeness replaces belief in vulnerability. Supply flows naturally as recognition of infinite source replaces belief in limitation. Relationships harmonize beautifully as awareness of divine presence in all replaces judgment and separation. Inner peace becomes your natural state regardless of external circumstances changing. This is what Joel Goldsmith dedicated his entire life to teaching others because he witnessed it work consistently again and again. This is the central transformative message of Jesus that was hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years, while humanity worshipped the messenger and ignored the message. You do not need to become spiritual or achieve some special state. You need only to recognize the spiritual truth that you already are beneath all appearances. "I am the way" means recognizing divine consciousness as your true identity is the path to all genuine transformation in every area of life. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, Subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path. For 30 years, Joel Goldsmith searched every religion, every philosophy, every healing method known to humanity. What he discovered in a moment of desperate silence changed everything we thought we knew about God, healing, and the very nature of reality itself. This wasn't just another spiritual teaching. Most people pray to God, asking for things, begging for help, hoping for miracles from some distant divine power. Joel discovered we've been approaching this completely backward for centuries. The revolutionary truth he uncovered doesn't just heal bodies. It transforms entire lives in ways that seem impossible. The secret isn't about getting God's attention or becoming worthy of divine love. It's about realizing something so profound, so simple, that when you truly understand it, physical healing, emotional freedom, and material abundance become natural expressions of what you already are. This discovery shattered every religious assumption Joel had ever held. It challenged the very foundation of traditional Christianity and opened a doorway to what he called the mystical path, a way of living that makes miracles ordinary and transforms every moment into a sacred encounter. Here's what Joel realized that night in 1946 during his deepest spiritual crisis. God isn't separate from you, waiting somewhere in heaven to be contacted through prayer or worship. God is your very consciousness when it's free from the illusion of separation. This isn't philosophy. This is practical foundation for miracles. Think about it carefully. Every time you've experienced peace, love, or sudden knowing that transcended your circumstances, you weren't contacting something outside yourself. You were experiencing your true nature without the interference of fear-based thinking. Joel called this the Christ within, your divine identity. When you stop seeking God out there and recognize the divine presence as your own consciousness expressing itself as your life, something extraordinary happens. Problems don't get solved through effort. They dissolve because you're no longer creating them from a place of separation and lack. This recognition changes everything about how you approach challenges, relationships, health, and abundance. You're no longer a limited human being seeking help from God. Your divine consciousness itself, expressing as your individual human experience. Joel discovered what he called the practicing of the presence. But this isn't meditation as most people know it. This is a radical shift in how you perceive reality moment by moment. You stop seeing yourself as a human being having occasional spiritual experiences during prayer or meditation. Instead, you begin recognizing yourself as spiritual consciousness having a human experience. When this recognition becomes natural rather than something you have to remember to do, your entire relationship with challenges, health, relationships, and abundance transforms at the core level. The practicing isn't something you do for 20 minutes in the morning and evening. It becomes the foundation from which you live every moment of your day. You begin to see through the appearances of discord to the underlying harmony that's always been present. You start recognizing that what you call problems are actually invitations to go deeper into truth. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to practice seeing through appearances to spiritual reality until this seeing becomes more natural than breathing itself. This is where Joel's teaching becomes revolutionary and challenges everything traditional religion has taught about the relationship between humanity and divinity. He taught that the moment you realize I and the Father are one, you stop being a person who needs healing and become the very presence that does the healing. You're not trying to get something from God. You are the God presence expressing itself as your individual consciousness. But here's the part most teachers miss completely. This realization doesn't happen through effort, technique, or years of spiritual practice. It happens through what Joel called resting in the silence of being. When thoughts stop trying to fix, change, or improve anything. When the mind releases its grip on outcomes and solutions, truth reveals itself naturally. A woman came to Joel with terminal cancer that doctors said was incurable. Instead of treating her condition, he sat with her in this silence of being. Within weeks, every trace of cancer had disappeared from her body. The doctors called it medically impossible. Joel knew it was spiritually inevitable once the illusion of separation dissolved and her true spiritual identity was recognized and experienced. Margaret had struggled with chronic pain for 15 years that dominated every aspect of her daily life. Doctors, specialists, alternative healers, pain management clinics. Nothing provided lasting relief. She'd tried every spiritual method imaginable, from positive thinking to energy healing. But the pain persisted relentlessly. When she finally encountered Joel's teaching through a friend, she was skeptical but desperate enough to try anything. The first breakthrough came not during formal meditation, but while washing dishes one ordinary Tuesday morning. She suddenly realized she'd been seeking healing as Margaret, the suffering person. In that moment of washing dishes, something extraordinary happened. Margaret, the person with chronic pain, disappeared from her awareness, and only pure awareness remained. Awareness without pain, without story, without the identity that had been suffering for 15 years. The pain was simply absent. Within 3 months, the chronic pain that had defined her life for 15 years was completely gone. But more than that, Margaret discovered she was living from a completely different foundation. Fear-based thinking had lost its grip on her consciousness entirely, and life became an adventure rather than an endurance test. Robert was facing complete financial ruin after 20 years of building his business. Bankruptcy papers were being prepared, creditors were calling daily, and his marriage was falling apart under the crushing weight of financial pressure. Traditional positive thinking and manifestation techniques had only made him feel more frustrated and hopeless. Joel taught him something radically different from anything he'd encountered in self-help or prosperity teachings. Instead of trying to demonstrate prosperity or attract abundance from outside himself, Robert learned to recognize the abundance that was already present in his consciousness as his spiritual birthright. He stopped seeing himself as lacking and needing to attract abundance from some external source. As Robert began living from this recognition of inherent wholeness rather than acquired prosperity, opportunities appeared naturally without force or struggle. His consciousness shifted from scarcity to abundance. Within 6 months, not only was his business thriving beyond his previous success, but his relationships had transformed because he was no longer operating from fear and desperation. He was expressing from fullness rather than grasping from emptiness, and life responded accordingly. Sarah had been battling severe depression for most of her adult life, spending years in therapy and trying various medications that provided some relief, but never addressed the underlying emptiness. She'd tried meditation, spiritual practices, self-help programs. Some provided temporary uplift, but nothing created lasting transformation. Through Joel's teaching, Sarah discovered that depression wasn't something wrong with her that needed to be fixed through treatment or positive thinking. It was the natural result of consciousness believing it was separate from its source, cut off from the love and wholeness that is its true nature. When this fundamental belief in separation dissolved through recognition of her true spiritual identity, depression couldn't maintain itself anymore. The shift happened gradually over several weeks as Sarah began experiencing moments of causeless joy and deep peace that had no external reason or trigger. These moments expanded and deepened until they became her natural state, rather than temporary experiences. The person who had been depressed for decades simply was no longer there. A new foundation for living had been established that was unshakable by external circumstances. James had been seeking spiritual truth for 20 years through various teachers, traditions, and practices. He'd had profound experiences, moments of awakening and deep peace, but somehow always seemed to fall back into old patterns of thinking and reacting to life's challenges with the same fears and frustrations. What Joel revealed changed everything about James's approach to spirituality. James realized he'd been treating spirituality as something he did rather than something he was. He'd been seeking enlightenment as a future attainment, rather than recognizing his true nature as already enlightened consciousness temporarily forgetting itself. The moment he stopped seeking enlightenment and recognized his true nature as already enlightened consciousness, simply having a temporary human experience, everything shifted permanently. The spiritual search ended not because he found what he was looking for, but because he realized he'd never actually lost it. James describes it as coming home to himself after 20 years of looking everywhere else for what had always been present. The seeking ended, but spiritual living began in a completely natural, effortless way that integrated seamlessly with daily human responsibilities and relationships. If these transformation stories inspire you, Like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond the primary realization of oneness, Joel developed what he called spiritual treatment. But this isn't treatment as most people understand it. This isn't sending thoughts, energy, or prayers to fix problems. It's recognizing the spiritual truth that dissolves the illusion, creating the appearance of the problem in the first place. When someone calls asking for help with a health challenge, financial crisis, or relationship conflict, a Joel Goldsmith practitioner doesn't try to heal the condition or solve the problem. Instead, they rest in the recognition that in spiritual truth, there is no person with a condition. There is only perfect spiritual being expressing. This recognition and consciousness has immediate and tangible effects in what we call the physical world. Symptoms disappear, relationships heal, financial situations resolve, not because something was sent to fix them, but because the truth of being dissolved the illusion that created the appearance of discord. The practitioner becomes a transparency for truth rather than a person trying to help another person. This complete shift in identity from helper to transparency for divine consciousness is what makes Joel's approach to healing so remarkably effective and permanent. Joel taught what he called spiritual discernment, the developed ability to see beyond appearances to spiritual reality in every situation you encounter. When you look at a magnificent sunset, you're not simply seeing colored light hitting particles in the atmosphere. You're witnessing infinite beauty expressing itself in form. This same discernment applies to everything in your experience throughout the day. When you see lack, discord, disease, or limitation, you're looking at appearances that have no spiritual reality. Spiritual discernment reveals the underlying perfection that's always present, always available to be experienced by consciousness. The practice isn't about denying what appears to be happening or pretending problems don't exist. It's about recognizing what's really happening behind the appearances. Divine consciousness expressing itself perfectly, even when that perfection is temporarily obscured by limited perception. This recognition naturally transforms your experience without effort or struggle. You don't change the appearances, you see through them to reality, and the appearances naturally align with the truth you're recognizing rather than the illusion you were believing. One of Joel's most powerful and transformative techniques was what he called the art of dying daily. This isn't about physical death, it's about the daily dying of the personal sense of self that believes it's separate from God, from good, from the wholeness that is its true nature. Every time you catch yourself thinking as a person who lacks something, needs something, or fears something, you can let that personal sense die in that moment. In its place, you recognize yourself as the very presence of completeness, expressing itself as your individual experience of life. This dying to the personal sense becomes so natural and automatic that you begin living from spiritual identity rather than human identity, without effort or constant remembering. From this foundation, what humans call miracles become normal, natural expressions of what you actually are. The daily practice of dying to limitation and being reborn to truth creates a momentum of transformation that eventually becomes self-sustaining. You no longer have to work at being spiritual, you simply are spiritual consciousness expressing as human experience. Joel discovered that the key to permanent transformation lies in what he called the middle path, living fully human while knowing yourself as divine consciousness. You don't transcend the human experience or escape into some ethereal spiritual realm. You live human life from your true spiritual foundation. This means you pay your bills, maintain your relationships, care for your body, and fulfill your responsibilities. But you do all of this from the recognition of your true nature rather than from fear, lack, or the belief that you're separate from infinite good. The middle path dissolves the old spiritual misconception that you must choose between being spiritual and being practical. You become supremely practical because you're operating from truth rather than illusion, from abundance rather than limitation, from love rather than fear. Daily life becomes a continuous expression of spiritual principles rather than a distraction from them. Work becomes worship, relationships become holy encounters, and the most ordinary activities become opportunities to express divine creativity and love. But let's be completely honest about the challenges you'll face as you begin living these truths. The mind that's been conditioned for years or decades to think in terms of separation, lack, and limitation doesn't instantly embrace these revolutionary ideas. You might experience what Joel called periods of spiritual dryness. During these challenging times, the old thinking patterns seem to return with a vengeance. You might doubt everything you've learned, feel like you're back where you started, or wonder if any of this spiritual understanding is real or just wishful thinking and self-deception. Joel taught that these periods are actually signs of genuine progress, not failure or spiritual regression. They're the final attempts of conditioned thinking to maintain its grip on your consciousness. The key is not to fight these experiences, but to continue resting in truth even when you don't feel it. These dark nights of the soul, as mystics have called them, are temporary and necessary parts of the transformation process. They're opportunities to prove that your spiritual understanding doesn't depend on feeling good or having positive experiences. Another common challenge that can derail spiritual progress is what Joel called spiritual pride, the subtle tendency to believe you're more evolved, more enlightened, or spiritually superior to others who haven't discovered these truths. This form of separation can actually block your continued spiritual unfoldment. The antidote to spiritual pride is genuine humility, recognizing that spiritual understanding is a gift of grace, not a personal achievement or accomplishment. You didn't earn or deserve this awareness any more than you earned the ability to breathe or your heart's ability to beat automatically. When spiritual pride arises, and it will arise subtly even in sincere seekers, return immediately to the simplicity of gratitude. Be grateful that truth is revealing itself through your consciousness, and let that gratitude dissolve any sense of spiritual superiority or separation from others. Remember that everyone is the same divine consciousness expressing at different levels of recognition. Your role is to be transparent for truth, not to judge others' spiritual development or try to convince them of what you've discovered. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of Joel's teaching is learning to live without the mental habit of trying to use spiritual truth to get something. The conditioned mind wants to turn these principles into techniques for manifesting desires, solving problems, or achieving better life circumstances. But the moment you try to use truth to get something, you've stepped back into the consciousness of separation. You've become a person who lacks something and is trying to use spirituality to acquire it. True spiritual living means recognizing that you already are everything you could ever need or want. This doesn't mean desires disappear or that you become passive about improving your life circumstances. It means your desires arise from fullness rather than emptiness, and their fulfillment happens naturally as expressions of what you are, rather than acquisitions by who you think you are. The shift from using truth to being truth is subtle but crucial. When you are truth expressing, your life naturally reflects that truth without effort, manipulation, or trying to make things happen through spiritual techniques. The ultimate challenge in Joel's path is what he called the final sacrifice, giving up even the desire for spiritual experiences, spiritual progress, or advanced spiritual understanding. As long as you're seeking something spiritual, you're maintaining the illusion of separation from what you seek. The resolution comes through grace, spontaneous moments when seeking stops not because you found what you were looking for, but because you suddenly realize the seeker and the sought are one and have always been one. These moments of grace can't be produced through effort, but they can be welcomed. When you stop trying to become spiritual and simply rest in what you are right now, the spiritual nature of your being reveals itself naturally. This is the end of the spiritual path because you realize there was never anywhere to go or anything to attain. The final sacrifice leads to the ultimate freedom, living without spiritual seeking while being constantly aware of your spiritual nature. You become ordinary in the most extraordinary way, completely human while completely divine. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Living Joel's teaching in daily life means bringing this consciousness of oneness into every situation, relationship, and challenge you encounter. When your coworker irritates you with their behavior, instead of reacting from personality and old conditioning, you recognize the Christ in them, and the Christ as your own true identity. This isn't about being nice, tolerant, or spiritually correct. It's about seeing through the personal appearances to spiritual reality. When you consistently see from this perspective, Relationships become harmonious not because people change their behavior to please you, but because you're seeing their true nature. At work, instead of competing, manipulating, or struggling for advancement, you express your spiritual qualities, creativity, wisdom, love, intelligence, naturally and authentically. Opportunities arise because you're being authentic spiritual expression rather than a personality trying to get something. Your presence at work becomes uplifting to others, not because you're preaching or teaching spirituality, but because you're living from a foundation of peace and wholeness that others unconsciously recognize and are drawn to. In parenting, Joel's principles create profound harmony and understanding between parents and children. Instead of seeing your children as people you need to control, guide, or fix, you recognize them as spiritual beings expressing their divine nature through the temporary experience of childhood. This recognition allows you to guide and discipline from love rather than fear, from wisdom rather than control. Children respond to this spiritual recognition with natural cooperation because they're being seen and treated as the divine beings they actually are, not just as small humans with problems. Family conflicts resolve more easily because you're not taking personal behavior personally. You see through temporary emotional expressions to the permanent spiritual identity of each family member. This doesn't mean you become permissive. It means you respond from wisdom rather than reaction. The home becomes a sanctuary where everyone feels safe to express their authentic nature because they're being seen and loved for what they are, rather than judged for what they do or don't do. Financial challenges become opportunities to prove spiritual principles in practical, tangible ways. Instead of seeing money as something external you need to attract, earn, or struggle for, you recognize abundance as the very nature of infinite consciousness, expressing itself as your experience. This doesn't mean becoming passive about money or ignoring practical responsibilities. It means approaching financial obligations and opportunities from spiritual abundance rather than material lack. You make wise decisions, work diligently, and manage resources responsibly from fullness rather than fear. Many practitioners find that as they live from this recognition of inherent abundance, their financial situations naturally improve not through struggle, manifestation techniques, or trying to attract money, but as natural expressions of the abundance they recognize themselves to be. Money becomes a tool for expressing love, rather than a source of security or identity. This shift in relationship to money often results in greater financial freedom because decisions are made from wisdom rather than fear or greed. Physical health becomes a natural expression of spiritual wholeness when you begin recognizing your body as the visible expression of perfect spiritual being, rather than a material thing that can get sick or break down. This recognition transforms your entire approach to health and healing. This understanding doesn't replace medical care when needed, but it provides the spiritual foundation that supports all healing, whether through medicine, natural methods, or spontaneous resolution. You work with healthcare providers from wisdom rather than fear, making decisions from wholeness rather than desperation. The body responds to being seen and treated as spiritual rather than merely material. Many practitioners report improved health, increased vitality, and faster healing as natural results of living from spiritual identity rather than material identification. You begin to understand that symptoms are often consciousness expressing imbalance, and as consciousness returns to its natural state of wholeness, the body naturally reflects that harmony. Health becomes normal rather than something you have to work to maintain. As Joel's teaching becomes your natural way of being rather than something you practice, you discover what he called the healing consciousness. You begin to have a positive, uplifting effect on everyone you encounter, often without saying anything specifically spiritual or trying to help anyone. People are naturally drawn to the peace they feel in your presence. They open up, share their challenges, and often find their own solutions simply through being around someone who is resting in spiritual truth, rather than reacting from personal conditioning and fear. This healing presence becomes so natural that you often don't realize you're having this effect on others. You're simply being yourself, your true spiritual self, and that authenticity creates space for others to connect with their own truth and find their own answers. You become a living demonstration of spiritual principles rather than someone who talks about them. This demonstration is far more powerful than any words because people can feel the reality of what you've discovered through your presence. Years of living these principles consistently create what Joel called spiritual stability, the developed ability to remain centered in truth regardless of external circumstances. Economic upheavals, health challenges, relationship conflicts no longer throw you into emotional chaos or mental confusion. You respond to life's inevitable challenges with wisdom and love because you're responding from spiritual identity rather than personal reaction. This doesn't mean you become emotionless or detached. It means your emotions arise from truth rather than illusion. This stability becomes a precious gift to everyone in your life. In times of crisis, you naturally become a source of calm, wisdom, and practical guidance because you're seeing clearly rather than reacting from fear or personal attachment to specific outcomes. People learn to trust your perspective because it comes from a place of spiritual discernment rather than personal opinion or emotional reaction. You become someone others can depend on for balanced, loving guidance. The ultimate fruit of Joel's teaching is what he called the mystical life, living in constant conscious communion with the divine presence that you are. Prayer becomes an ongoing recognition of truth rather than periodic asking for help, guidance, or intervention from an external God. Every moment becomes an opportunity to witness infinite love expressing itself as your experience and the experience of everyone around you. Work becomes worship, relationships become holy encounters, and the most ordinary activities become expressions of divine creativity. You realize that the mystical life isn't separate from ordinary human life. It's ordinary human life lived from your true spiritual identity. Nothing in your external circumstances needs to change except the foundation from which you perceive and respond to everything. The mystical life is available to everyone because everyone is spiritual consciousness expressing as individual human experience. Joel's teaching shows you how to recognize and live from this truth consistently. This is what Joel Goldsmith uncovered in that moment of desperate silence. Not a new religion, spiritual practice, or self-improvement technique, but the eternal truth of what you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning, seeking, and spiritual effort. You are divine consciousness individualized, expressing as your unique human experience. The journey doesn't end with understanding these principles intellectually or having occasional spiritual experiences. It begins with living them moment by moment until they become more natural than breathing, more automatic than your heartbeat. This is your birthright, your true identity, your permanent spiritual foundation. You don't need to become spiritual, achieve enlightenment, or earn God's love. You need to stop believing you're anything other than the spiritual being you've always been. When this recognition becomes your natural state of consciousness, you discover that everything you ever sought through spirituality has always been your own true nature. The search ends, but life begins. Life lived from the foundation of truth, rather than the quicksand of illusion. This is Joel Goldsmith's gift to humanity, the recognition that what we seek, we are. What we hope to become, we already are. What we long for, we have never been without. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path. In his final days, Joel Goldsmith whispered words that would change everything you believe about spiritual healing and consciousness. These weren't just teachings. They were his deepest revelations about the secret that transforms ordinary minds into instruments of divine power and unlimited healing. What he shared contradicts everything traditional religion taught him. It goes beyond positive thinking, beyond prayer as most know it, beyond visualization and affirmation. This secret unlocks the very mechanism through which consciousness itself becomes the healing force that dissolves all limitation instantly. The revelation is simple yet profound. I of myself can do nothing. The Father within doeth the works. But what Joel discovered in his final hours was how to actually activate this principle instantly, not just understand it intellectually or hope it might work someday. This isn't another technique to add to your spiritual toolkit. This is the master key that makes every other practice work effortlessly. When you understand what Joel realized in those sacred final moments, everything changes. Your health, your relationships, your abundance, your very experience of being alive. For decades, Joel searched for the missing link between spiritual truth and practical transformation. that actually works in daily life. He studied with mystics, healed thousands of people, wrote revolutionary books, yet something remained hidden until those precious final moments when clarity struck like lightning through his consciousness. He realized that most seekers, including himself for years, were trying to use consciousness to get something from God. They were approaching spirituality like a cosmic vending machine. Put in enough prayer, meditation, and positive thinking, and get out healing, abundance, and happiness. But the secret he uncovered was the complete opposite. How to let consciousness reveal that you already are the very thing you seek. You don't need to get health because you are perfect life itself. You don't need to attract abundance because you are infinite supply expressing. This isn't about asking, begging, demanding, or even affirming. It's about recognizing the I am that has always been present, waiting patiently behind every problem, every lack, every fear, ready to dissolve them all through simple recognition of what has always been true about your real nature. Joel's last words weren't spoken to crowds or recorded for posterity. They were whispered in the sacred silence of his transition, heard only by consciousness itself. Yet these words contain the master key that unlocks every spiritual mystery you've ever encountered throughout your entire spiritual journey. He discovered that every healing, every demonstration of supply, every moment of deep peace comes through one simple practice. Stop trying to be spiritual and recognize that spirituality is trying to be you. This recognition changes everything instantly because it aligns you with what you already are. The technique is so simple that the intellectual mind rejects it as too easy. So profound that it works when nothing else will. So natural that you've been using it unconsciously your whole life. You just didn't know how to access it deliberately when you need it most. Most people spend years studying complex spiritual systems, learning elaborate techniques, trying to purify themselves enough to deserve God's attention. But Joel's final secret bypasses all of that struggle and reveals the truth that has always been present. You are the divine consciousness you've been seeking outside yourself. What Joel realized in those final sacred moments was that every person carries within them the complete solution to every problem they will ever face, not as potential that might develop someday, but as present reality waiting to be acknowledged through a specific shift in consciousness that anyone can make. This shift doesn't require years of study, perfect faith, elimination of all doubt, or any special qualifications. It requires only one thing: the willingness to stop being the person who has the problem and start being the consciousness that dissolves it naturally and effortlessly. The secret practice he discovered allows you to make this shift in seconds, not lifetimes. It works whether you believe it or not, whether you feel worthy or not, whether you understand it completely or not. Truth operates regardless of our opinions about it or our feelings of readiness. This is why Joel's approach was so revolutionary. He discovered that consciousness healing doesn't depend on your faith level, your spiritual development, or your worthiness. It depends only on recognition of what you already are, the very consciousness that creates, sustains, and dissolves all experiences. Margaret came to Joel's final seminar carrying 20 years of chronic pain that no doctor could explain or heal. Traditional medicine failed her completely. Psychology offered no lasting relief. Even years of metaphysical study brought only temporary comfort before the agony returned stronger than ever before. She had tried everything: medications that stopped working, surgeries that made things worse, therapies that helped for a few days before the pain reasserted its dominance over her life. She was desperate and running out of hope when she heard about Joel's revolutionary approach to consciousness healing. Within minutes of learning Joel's final technique, something shifted in her consciousness. Not the pain itself, that remained exactly the same. But her relationship to the pain transformed completely. She stopped being Margaret with pain and became pure awareness, observing an experience that couldn't touch her true nature. 3 days later, she woke without pain for the first time in decades. But more importantly, she had discovered her true identity as consciousness itself. The awareness that remains forever untouched by any physical or emotional experience that passes through it like clouds through an endless sky. Robert had lost everything in a business collapse that destroyed his reputation and left his family facing foreclosure. Desperation led him to Joel's teachings, but intellectual understanding of spiritual principles couldn't pay the bills or restore his shattered confidence in his ability to provide for his family. He understood the metaphysical laws intellectually. He could quote scripture about God's abundance. He affirmed prosperity daily and visualized success regularly. But none of these practices translated into practical results when creditors called and bills accumulated faster than his depleted resources could handle. When Robert learned to apply Joel's final secret, he stopped trying to fix his circumstances from the position of a desperate person and started recognizing himself as the consciousness in which both prosperity and poverty appear as temporary experiences, neither touching his true infinite nature. Within weeks, unexpected opportunities emerged from nowhere. Former clients returned with new projects. New partnerships formed naturally. But the real transformation was Robert's unshakable peace, knowing that his true identity as infinite consciousness could never be threatened by any external circumstance or financial condition. Sarah struggled with depression that psychiatric medications couldn't lift and therapy couldn't cure permanently. Years of counseling helped her understand her patterns but couldn't break the cycle of dark moods that seemed to control her life completely. She felt trapped in a mind she couldn't escape or heal. The depression wasn't just sadness. It was a heavy blanket of hopelessness that made simple daily activities feel overwhelming. She had tried antidepressants, therapy, exercise, meditation, prayer, and every self-help approach she could find, but nothing provided lasting relief from the mental anguish. Joel's final teaching showed Sarah how to stop identifying with the depressed thoughts and emotions and start identifying with the awareness that observes them. She learned to be the sky in which all weather patterns pass, never touched by storms that seem so real from inside them. The depression didn't vanish overnight, but Sarah's relationship to it transformed immediately. She discovered an inner stillness that no mood could disturb, the I am that exists prior to all psychological states, and remains eternally free from every condition that seems to control human experience. These transformation stories share one common element that makes them so powerful. Each person discovered their true identity as consciousness itself, not as a person trying to use consciousness to improve their situation. This recognition is the foundation of all genuine healing and lasting peace that Joel spent his lifetime teaching. Joel's final secret works because it aligns you with what you already are, not what you hope to become through spiritual practice. It reveals the perfection that has always been present, hidden only by the mistaken belief that you are something other than pure awareness expressing as individual consciousness. The people who experience these transformations didn't become more spiritual or develop new powers. They simply recognized what had always been true but was temporarily forgotten. They are the very consciousness they were seeking to contact, please, or convince to help them with their problems. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with your heart today? Beyond the primary recognition of your true nature as consciousness, Joel discovered complementary practices that accelerate and deepen this realization. These aren't separate techniques but expressions of the same fundamental truth from different angles, like facets of a diamond reflecting the same pure light. The first supporting practice he called the witness position. Instead of being caught in experiences and identified with them completely, you learn to observe them from the unchanging center of awareness. This creates immediate space between you and any problem or limitation that seems to control your life. Practice this now. Notice that you are aware of reading these words. You are not the words themselves, not the thoughts about them, not even the person reading them, but the awareness in which all of these appear. This awareness is your true identity, infinite, eternal, and inherently free. This witness position isn't detachment or dissociation from life. It's the most intimate connection possible, recognizing yourself as the very consciousness in which all experiences arise, unfold, and dissolve naturally without resistance or attachment to outcomes. Joel's second supporting technique involves recognizing that every problem exists only in time, while your true nature exists outside of time altogether. When you shift identity from the time-bound person to timeless awareness, problems lose their reality and power to affect your essential being. This practice dissolves worry instantly, because worry requires a future that doesn't exist in pure awareness. It heals regret because regret requires a past that has no reality in present consciousness. Only now is real, and now is always perfect, complete, and lacking nothing. Try this. Feel your way into this present moment so completely that past and future disappear entirely. In this eternal now, what problem could possibly exist? What lack could be real? What fear could have any foundation when only perfection is present in timeless awareness? This is your natural state of being, always available, always perfect, always free from every condition that seems to trouble the time-bound mind. The more you rest in this timeless awareness, the more naturally your life reflects this perfection in practical ways. The third technique Joel perfected in his final years involves using gratitude not as a feeling or emotion, but as recognition of what already is. Instead of being thankful for what you hope to receive in the future, you become grateful for the completeness that already exists within you right now. This isn't positive thinking or affirmation designed to attract good things. It's acknowledgement of the infinite supply, perfect health, and unlimited love that consciousness itself is. You don't have these qualities as possessions. You are these qualities expressing as individual awareness. Begin practicing this recognition. I am grateful that I am infinite supply itself. I am grateful that I am perfect health itself. I am grateful that I am unlimited love itself. Feel the truth of these statements in your being. They are not hopes for the future, but facts about your present nature. This recognition gratitude bypasses the usual spiritual trap of seeking to become what you already are. It establishes you immediately in the truth of your being, and allows that truth to express naturally in your daily experience without force or struggle. These complementary practices work together to establish you more firmly in the recognition of your true nature as consciousness itself. The witness position creates space between you and limiting experiences. Timeless awareness dissolves problems at their source, and recognition gratitude reveals the completeness you have always been. None of these techniques require perfection or even belief to work effectively. They operate through the simple willingness to experiment with truth and see what happens when you approach life from your true position as consciousness, rather than as a limited person seeking improvement. Start with whichever practice feels most natural and accessible to you right now. Let it lead you deeper into the others organically. The goal isn't to master techniques, but to recognize what you already are. The consciousness in which all techniques appear and disappear. Remember, you're not trying to become something new or develop spiritual powers you don't have. You're recognizing what has always been true but was temporarily forgotten. This recognition is the healing power that Joel discovered transforms every aspect of life naturally and effortlessly. Even with perfect understanding of these principles, most people encounter predictable obstacles that can temporarily derail their practice and make them doubt the effectiveness of consciousness recognition. Joel faced these same challenges and developed specific ways to work with them without fighting or trying to overcome them forcefully. The first common obstacle is doubt, the mind's insistence that this approach is too simple to work for serious problems like chronic illness, financial ruin, or deep emotional trauma. Doubt is natural and doesn't disqualify you from success. Joel learned to welcome doubt as another experience arising in consciousness. When doubt appears, don't try to eliminate it or convince yourself it's wrong through positive thinking. Simply notice, I am aware of doubt arising in consciousness. You are not the doubt. You are the consciousness in which doubt appears and disappears naturally like clouds in an endless sky. Doubt actually serves a purpose in consciousness recognition. It shows you where you're still identified with the person mind rather than resting in your true nature as awareness itself. Use doubt as a reminder to return to the witness position rather than fighting it as an enemy. Another frequent challenge is the tendency to measure progress by external circumstances rather than inner recognition of your true nature. Students often abandon the practice when immediate physical or financial changes don't appear, not realizing that inner transformation always precedes outer demonstration in consciousness. Joel emphasized that consciousness shift happens instantly when recognition occurs, but its reflection in the world of form may take days, weeks, or months, depending on various factors beyond your personal control. The key is maintaining the recognition regardless of external appearances or seeming delays. Practice patience by remembering that you are consciousness itself, not a person waiting for consciousness to improve your life circumstances. From this perspective, you already have everything because you are everything, expressed as individual awareness experiencing itself in time and space. The external world reflects consciousness, but consciousness doesn't depend on the external world for its completeness or perfection. Your well-being comes from recognizing what you are, not from getting what you want from outside sources that can be gained or lost. The third major obstacle Joel identified is the habit of returning to problem consciousness when faced with challenging situations. Under pressure, we automatically revert to identifying with the person who has problems rather than the consciousness that dissolves them naturally through simple recognition. This is normal human conditioning, not spiritual failure or lack of development. Joel taught that each return to problem consciousness is an opportunity to practice the recognition again. Every challenge becomes a doorway deeper into your true identity as limitless awareness that remains unaffected by conditions. When you catch yourself in problem thinking, gently ask, who or what is aware of this problem thinking? This question immediately shifts you back to your true position as consciousness itself, naturally restoring peace and clarity to handle any situation from wisdom rather than fear. Don't judge yourself for forgetting your true nature temporarily. The fact that you notice the forgetting means you're already remembering. Each recognition strengthens your natural resting place in consciousness rather than in personal identity with its endless concerns and limitations. These obstacles aren't meant to be eliminated but transcended through understanding their nature as temporary experiences in consciousness. Joel's approach was never to fight challenges but to recognize them as opportunities for deeper realization of truth and more consistent resting in your natural state of being. The secret is consistency rather than perfection in practice. Each time you remember your true nature as consciousness, you strengthen that recognition. Each time you forget and return to person identification, you create another opportunity to remember what you really are beneath all conditions. Progress in consciousness. Recognition isn't measured by the absence of challenges, but by your response to them. Do you meet difficulties as a person who has problems, or as consciousness in which problems appear and dissolve naturally? This shift in position changes everything about how you experience life. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? In Joel's advanced workshops, he taught students how to maintain consciousness recognition while engaged in daily activities and relationships. This integration phase is where the real transformation occurs, when spiritual realization becomes a natural way of living rather than a special practice you do at certain times. The key is learning to perform all activities from the consciousness position rather than the person position. Whether working at your job, relating to family members, handling financial concerns, or dealing with health issues, everything becomes an expression of your true nature as awareness rather than problems to solve. Start with simple activities: washing dishes as consciousness, driving as consciousness, listening to others as consciousness rather than as a person trying to get something from them. Notice how this shift changes the quality of every experience from ordinary and stressful to sacred and peaceful naturally. This doesn't mean becoming passive or uninvolved in life. It means engaging fully from your true position as consciousness rather than from the limited perspective of personal identity with its fears, desires, and constant need to protect itself from imagined threats. Advanced students often discover that challenging relationships become their greatest teachers for maintaining consciousness recognition under pressure. Joel found that family members and difficult colleagues provide perfect opportunities to practice being awareness rather than personality defending itself against attack. When someone triggers anger, hurt, or defensiveness, this is consciousness showing you where person identification still operates automatically. Instead of trying to change others or protect your ego from their behavior, you use these moments to return to your true position as limitless awareness. Practice this. Next time someone irritates you or pushes your buttons, silently recognize I am consciousness itself, aware of irritation arising and passing. This shifts you from being an irritated person to being the awareness that observes irritation without being touched or disturbed by it. From the consciousness position, you can respond to difficult people with wisdom and appropriate action, without losing your peace or getting caught in emotional reactions that solve nothing and often make situations worse through defensive or aggressive responses. Financial concerns often test consciousness recognition most severely because money seems so tied to survival and security in human experience. Joel taught advanced students to recognize abundance as the very nature of consciousness itself, not something consciousness needs to acquire from outside sources. This recognition transforms your relationship to money and security completely. Instead of a person trying to get more money through effort or spiritual techniques, you become abundance itself, expressing as individual awareness. From this position, supply flows naturally because consciousness lacks nothing and is everything. Practice recognizing, I am consciousness, and consciousness is infinite abundance itself. Feel the truth of this statement in your being. Consciousness contains all possibilities, all resources, all solutions, and you are consciousness expressing individually rather than something separate trying to contact it. This doesn't mean money appears magically without practical action. It means you take inspired action from abundance consciousness rather than from lack consciousness, and this shift in your fundamental position changes everything about how opportunities and resources flow into your experience. Health challenges provide another powerful arena for advanced consciousness practice and recognition. Joel discovered that identifying with the body keeps you trapped in medical thinking and fear, while identifying with consciousness reveals your true nature as perfect life itself, expressing through but not limited by physical form. This doesn't mean ignoring practical medical care when needed, but approaching health issues from your true position as the life force itself, rather than as a body that might be sick or well. This recognition often accelerates healing while maintaining perfect peace regardless of symptoms or medical diagnoses. Advanced practice involves recognizing, I am consciousness, and consciousness is perfect life itself. From this position, the body becomes an expression of your infinite nature rather than a limitation that defines or confines you to material existence and its apparent vulnerabilities. When symptoms arise, you meet them as consciousness aware of physical sensations rather than as a sick person trying to get well. This subtle but profound shift often allows the body's natural healing intelligence to operate more effectively without the interference of fear and resistance. Joel's final realization brought together all aspects of consciousness recognition into a unified understanding that transcends every limitation human experience can present. This wasn't just intellectual knowledge about spiritual principles, but lived reality that transformed his entire being and approach to existence. He discovered that consciousness is not something you have or use like a tool, but what you are at the deepest level of being. Every problem, every limitation, every fear exists only in the mistaken belief that you are something other than pure awareness itself expressing as individual consciousness. From this recognition flows natural healing, effortless supply, and unshakable peace, not as rewards for spiritual achievement or good behavior, but as the natural expression of your true nature finally recognized and lived authentically, rather than sought as something outside yourself. This is the ultimate secret Joel discovered. You don't need to become spiritual because you are spirituality itself individualized. You don't need to find God because consciousness is God expressing as you. You don't need to earn love because you are love aware of itself. The transformation Joel experienced in his final years wasn't about becoming more spiritual or achieving higher states of consciousness through practice and discipline. It was about recognizing the consciousness that had always been present, but was obscured by identification with personality, body, circumstances, and the story of being a separate person. This recognition reveals that you have never been separate from the divine source, because consciousness is the divine source individualized as your very being. There is no gap to bridge, no worthiness to earn, no perfection to achieve through effort, only truth to recognize about what you have always been. When you live from this recognition consistently, miracles become natural expressions of consciousness knowing itself, rather than violations of natural law. What seems impossible from person consciousness becomes inevitable from the position of your true nature, as limitless awareness expressing individually. The goal isn't to have mystical experiences or develop supernatural powers. The goal is to live from the simple recognition that you are the consciousness in which all experiences arise, unfold, and dissolve naturally, without resistance from a separate self trying to control outcomes. As Joel's physical form prepared to transition from this world, his consciousness expanded into the recognition that death itself is just another experience arising in awareness, unable to touch your true nature as eternal consciousness. This final realization completed his understanding of immortality as present fact, not future hope. He saw that birth and death, health and sickness, abundance and lack are all temporary experiences that pass through consciousness like clouds through sky. The sky remains forever unchanged regardless of weather patterns, and consciousness remains forever free regardless of conditions that seem to affect the person. This is your inheritance as consciousness itself, eternal existence beyond all conditions, infinite awareness beyond all limitations, perfect love beyond all fears, not as something you will become through spiritual development, but as what you have always been beneath the story of being a separate person. Joel's transition wasn't a loss, but a demonstration of the truth he taught. Consciousness cannot die because consciousness is life itself. What you really are continues eternally, expressing in countless forms, but never limited to any particular form or set of circumstances. Joel's last words were not spoken aloud, but lived completely. The absolute recognition that consciousness is all there is. Consciousness is what you are. And consciousness is eternally perfect, unlimited, and free from every condition that seems to limit human experience. This recognition is available to you right now, in this very moment. You don't need to wait for better conditions, more spiritual understanding, years of practice, or any form of preparation. The truth of your being as pure consciousness is present now, waiting only for your recognition and acceptance of what has always been true but was temporarily forgotten through identification with being a separate person. Everything Joel taught, every healing he witnessed, every transformation he facilitated came through this one simple recognition. You are the consciousness you seek. Stop seeking and start being what you already are. This is the ultimate secret that transforms everything instantly and permanently. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.